I've opened up more than a few compilation discs on this show. I love arcade game compilations or video game compilations. Between Activision Anthology, which was all about the 2600 games from Activision, to Namco's compilations, both the Namco Museum series for the original PlayStation and for the PlayStation 2, and some Sega compilations as well. And I've opened up some Midway compilations. You probably remember, if you've watched this show quite a bit, you've seen me open this back in 2019. This is Midway Arcade Treasures. This has more than 20 arcade games on there, mostly from the 1980s. Spy Hunter, Robotron 2084, Smash TV, 720 Degrees, Satan's Hollow, Sinistar, Paperboy. This has some really heavy hitters on it, and games that I certainly put tokens or quarters into when I was a kid of the 1980s. And then earlier in 2020, I opened up the sequel, Midway Arcade Treasures 2, which had some more heavy hitters on there. Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, Gauntlet 2, Spy Hunter 2, Arch Rivals, really the prequel to NBA Jam, Wizard of War, Pit Fighter, Timber, Cyberball 2072, Championship Sprint. These games, again, phenomenal games, taking me back to my arcade roots. And I love these. I love everything about these. I enjoy these very, very much. But there's always been one missing, because this was really a trilogy of compilations from Midway, and it has taken me a long time to track down the third, and I actually just came up with it at a fairly decent price. This here is Midway Arcade Treasures 3, the last of the trilogy, and this one is a little bit of a black sheep compared to the others, because this compilation is all about racing games. If you like racing games, you're going to like this compilation. If you don't like racing games, there's probably not a lot here for you. And we're going to break down each of these game by game in just a moment. Again, this is the last of the three. This was released fairly late, I believe. This was 2005, so this is really the beginning of the 7th generation of consoles. The Xbox 360 is just getting ready to come out. The PlayStation 2 is enjoying its last vestiges of popularity before the PlayStation 3, and the Wii would arrive a year later. So getting this in under the buzzer, I think, was pretty cool. And the games on here, at least if you ask me, are a mixed bag. There are some that are really impressive that I really like, and there are some on here that make me question why they were included. We have San Francisco Rush, the Rock Alcatraz Edition. San Francisco Rush, a big Midway Games or Atari Games release. San Francisco Rush was very popular in arcades, especially the sit-downs, and all of the Rush games were really popular. Hydro Thunder. Now, what's interesting about the version of Hydro Thunder that's here, it is the Dreamcast port of the arcade game, so it's not an arcade emulation per se. This is a Dreamcast port, so if you played the Dreamcast game, which I sure did and I enjoyed, then you're going to see a lot of familiarity here on the PlayStation 2, and it's kind of funny how that works out, given that the Dreamcast version came out first in 1999, and then 6 years later we get it on the PlayStation 2. We also have Super Off-Road here. Super Off-Road is a lot of fun. It's a Leland game. Super Off-Road would give way to Danny Sullivan's Indy Heat, which unfortunately is not here. Another fantastic game that's got that Super RC Pro-Am or that RC Pro-Am feel to it. Almost that isometric view. A lot of fun to play. Badlands, which is very much like Road Blasters, another fun racing game, and there's more combat than racing here. Race Driving, a game that I absolutely hated as a kid in arcades because I was just bad at it. It really was a more legitimate driving simulator, and it was all polygon based and looked very 3D and very futuristic, and I was just terrible at it and didn't play for very long before my time would run out. Stun Runner, another Atari game that's really kind of under the radar and not as well known, but it is one that is here. San Francisco Rush 2049, another Dreamcast port of an arcade game, and Off-Road Thunder is here as well. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, only 8 racing games on here, but if you consider the sizes, especially between the 2 Rush games and Hydro Thunder, that's quite a bit of horsepower that's on this one DVD-ROM. So let's go ahead and open this up and let's take a look to see what is on the inside. Now, unfortunately, this particular disc here looks like it's been sitting for a while and there's a little bit of a crack up top. It might be difficult to see it. So I'm hoping that the disc is in good shape. Take this off there. So it's just the top. There's no real damage in here. And when we look on the inside, I love the blue. I'm a big fan of the color blue. So that's just personal preference. We have the manual right here that we'll take a look at, and the DVD-ROM, and again, the matching blue artwork. So we had a black and yellow for the first release, the green in black for the second release, which almost reminded me of Xbox a little bit, or Mountain Dew if you prefer, and this one being the blue and black. Got a little bit of that Kenny Wayne Shepherd action going on. If you're a music fan, you understand what I mean. So here's the manual. Nothing on the back here, just a small logo for Midway Arcade Treasures 3. This is going to be black and white. It's not going to be in color. It is not a surprise. So the main menu is very drab. It is not very exciting. You get to see versions of the cabinets, and you get to kind of go through the menu here and just pick your game, whichever one you prefer. Unlike the other two Midway Arcade Treasures games, there's not really a lot here in terms of trivia or in terms of background. It's more just the games presented by themselves, and that's okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but there aren't as many bells and whistles, I guess, here as you might expect in a compilation disc like this one. So Hydro Thunder is the first one that's talked about here, and Hydro Thunder, to me, I remember playing this in arcades and loving it. The arcade that I played it at in Holyoke, Mass., the arcade operator always tended to have the volume way up, so there was almost a bit of distortion and bass coming from the kicker speakers in the back. But just that feeling of having that throttle in front of you and being able to kind of jam on it in order to really thrust yourself forward was really cool. The music is great. The music is like this overly bombastic soundtrack that you have to listen to believe. And all of the set pieces in this game, all of the crazy situations that you race in, it is an arcade racer, and it's an unabashed arcade racer at that. And that makes it fantastic. The Dreamcast version is a little bit light on extras, but holds its own against the arcade original. I don't know how the arcade original would fare on PlayStation 2 hardware. It's obviously much more difficult to emulate. Nevertheless, this is a fun version of the Dreamcast port, and I do recommend playing it if you can. So that, to me, is a plus. I think that that's a great addition. Here's Rush 2049, and I did play the Dreamcast version of this and liked it. This is the more futuristic version of Rush, obviously, based on the 2049 title. I will probably, 2049, I will be, 28 in 49, so 77 in 2049. We'll see if I'm still here. But anyway, this is futuristic, so the cars are all futuristic feel. I believe that there is a stunt mode in this game as well. So I do have some familiarity with it, but the Rush games didn't do as much for me as the Hydro Thunder games, so I can kind of take or leave these. It's cool that they're here, and for fans of the series, there's definitely a lot to appreciate. Off-Road Thunder is a game that I have very little knowledge of. I did not play this in arcades, and to be honest, I have this in my collection, and this game I tend to skip over for some reason, and I don't have an excuse for it. It basically combines the Super Off-Road series and that dune buggy dirt racing feel with a Thunder-like over-the-top feel to the game as well. I don't have a lot of information on this because I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I know now that I have this game and I've opened it up, I've got to take some time to play it at some point. So I'm kind of undecided on that one. Rush the Rock and Stun Runner. So Rush the Rock being an offshoot of San Francisco Rush, but taking place in Alcatraz. So it's a brand new track, it's a brand new layout. It still feels very much like San Francisco Rush. I'm a little surprised that the original Rush is not here, but we do get two Rush games all the same. We also have Stun Runner here, and again, this is a very futuristic, almost like a hover car kind of game. I didn't play this much in arcades, although I do remember seeing it. And I did pop a few tokens in there, but it just really didn't do a lot for me. So this is a 1-on-1. I think that Rush the Rock is decent. Stun Runner, I don't know how I feel about that one. Then we get to Badlands and Race Driving. So Badlands, I like. Badlands actually is not, and now that I'm remembering it, it is not like Road Blasters. It is more like Championship Sprint. So it's very much based on the Championship Sprint or the Super Sprint games, except there's more of a futuristic Mad Max feel to it. I like that. Whether it's Sprint or whether it was based on a Road Blaster sequel, it really doesn't matter. I like both of those games, so that one's a dub. That one's a win for me. Race Driving, I talked about that before. For its time, it was very impressive. It's all polygon based in terms of visuals, so it looked very futuristic at the time. There was a sit-down version of the game, so one of the reasons I like to play it is if I've been standing in an arcade for a while, just sitting in the cabinet and taking the load off was fun. There's a stunt version, or there's a stunt part of the track where you can do jumps and drive through loop-de-loops, but I'm not really fond of it. Perhaps Joe from GameStack would disagree, but for me, not so much. And finally, we have Super Off-Road, and I talked about that. I do like Super Off-Road. The Leland Company is an interesting story because Leland made Quarterback, which wound up being John Elway's Quarterback for the NES, and I really enjoyed Quarterback with the way that you threw the football with an analog lever. I thought that was pretty interesting. So Leland came out with some very interesting arcade games, and a lot of them were sports-based, and this was another one being racing-based. I didn't play it that much, if I'm being honest, until the NES version of the game. And getting to play the actual arcade emulation here, I think is pretty interesting. I think that this one is a win as well. Then there's some notes here which you'll never use, and then some credits here that you can read on your own. Just checking to see if there's anything interesting here in terms of names that I recognize. And sadly, there isn't really. This was kind of late in the Midway cycles, especially for the PS2. They were getting ready to transition to the Xbox 360, so it's not surprising to not see any familiar information. Of course, we have the Midway warranty card, which you could mail into Midway, which here is listed in San Diego, not in Chicago. So finally, at long last, I have opened up all 3 of the Midway Arcade Treasures games for the PlayStation, and it's been an awesome ride. It really has, as I kind of hold them out so you can see them. These are great compilations. If you have a PlayStation 2, if you have an Xbox, if you have a GameCube, I can't recommend these enough. Having these games basically gives you an arcade in your house. If you get these and you get the Namco Museum, especially Namco Museum 50th Anniversary, and if you get yourself the Capcom Classics collections, you're well on your way. You basically would have a dream scenario for any kid from the 80s to have all those arcade games ready to play. These are fantastic. I cannot recommend them enough. Whether you're, no matter what console you're collecting for from Generation 6, definitely keep your eye out for these. They are not very expensive. They are a lot of fun to play, and they definitely will bring memories, whether they are old ones or whether they will make new ones. That is it for this episode of Unsealed. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. This episode is coming just before Thanksgiving, so to all of my viewers and subscribers, I wish you the happiest and safest of Thanksgiving holidays this year. There will be more Unsealed episodes to come before the end of the year, but until that time comes, my friends, please take care of yourselves and each other during this very interesting time, and we'll do it again soon.